Welcome back once again to our accounting classroom, and we are continuing our look at the introduction to process costing. And in our previous video, we would have examined the method of valuing our inventory using the FIFO method, which is first in, first out. So what we are going to do now is we are going to look at the weighted average cost method, or the AVCO method, of valuing our inventory under process costing. So we have some steps that we will use to determine the valuation of our inventory using this method. Similarly, like FIFO, how we went through some steps, we will go through some steps with AVCO. So our first step, you have to prepare the equivalent units table. Again, just like FIFO, where you prepare the equivalent units table, on the AVCO, you also have to prepare the equivalent unit table to compute the equivalent units on or for the period. You have to calculate those equivalent units for opening inventory, fully completed, and closing inventory, just like FIFO method. However, there's a slight difference, because under the average cost method, opening inventory, all the units must be fully completed in the period. So under the AVCO, opening inventory, all the units must be fully completed in the period under review. And again, our fully completed units are all started and completed in the same period under review as well. And you will remember, under FIFO, those fully completed were 100%. So therefore, the opening inventory will also be 100% fully completed. Our closing inventory now, those will be the number of units you start in the period, but obviously they were partially completed. Here is a look at the equivalent units table using the AVCO method. And you see here, we have our opening inventory, fully completed, and closing inventory. We have our raw units and our cost elements. Remember, our cost elements are things like material, labor, production overhead. And you have to calculate the equivalent units for each one. So here you will see that we have here that our opening under the average cost method is 100% complete in each stage here for opening, and similarly for fully 100%, the degree of completion is 100%. However, for closing, you have to remember that those are partially completed. So when you can't calculate your equivalent units, then here you have a total. This is a total that I previously referred to in another video that you are going to use to help you calculate your cost per equivalent unit. Here again is another video, another table. This is our step 2. So we've looked at step 1. So step 2, you have to compute the cost for a fully completed unit, or in other words, the cost per equivalent unit for each cost element. But because we are using the average cost method, this is calculated slightly different than when you use the FIFO method. With the average cost method, you have to look at the cost of the opening inventory for each cost element, and to that you must add the cost incurred. That will give you the total cost for the particular cost element, and then you divide it by the cost per equivalent unit, and that will give you your cost per equivalent unit for the particular cost element. Again, you will add all of the cost per equivalent unit for each cost element, which will give you your total cost per equivalent unit. Step 3 then is to value your inventory under this method. So you're going to compute the associated production costs. Again, you're going to use the same table like what we would have done before, and you're going to multiply the cost per equivalent unit by the number of equivalent units for the output. That is the opening inventory, the fully completed, the opening inventory and the fully completed combined, the two of those together, and the closing inventory for each cost element. Okay, so you're going to calculate the cost per, you're going to multiply the cost per equivalent unit by the number of equivalent units for your output. So what is your output? Your output is your opening inventory plus your fully completed. And then you are going to do the same thing for the closing inventory, but this time you're going to use each cost element to work that out. So then step 4. So here is a look at the table, the weighted average cost table using where we use to calculate the value of our inventory. And you see here at the beginning we have the output, which is your opening plus your fully completed, and you get a total, and then you do the closing for each cost element. But then in our step 4, we will then have to do the process costing account. So again, just like FIFO, you will then prepare your process costing account from all the information you would have gathered prior to this stage. So step 4 then is to prepare the process costing account. So now that we would have looked at what is process costing, we would have looked at valuing our inventory using the FIFO and the AVCO method, we will realize because that our product is going through a process, you will have losses and gains. So we are going to look at process losses, and we are going to talk a little about that. So due to the nature of production being on a continuous basis, as I stated previously, all of your inputs will not make it to the output stage. So all the material that you put in will not make it to output. There are going to be some losses along the way of that material. So what happens is that the business usually provides for this loss as expected, and it is referred to as a normal loss, because the business is expecting that, you know, if they're using heat to process the product, that some of the raw material may be you may lose some of it through the evaporating process. So the business expects that to happen. Okay, so they usually provide for that, and that type of loss is known as a normal loss. So the normal loss is the expected loss under usual operating conditions. This is the loss you expect under normal operating conditions. And this loss can be due to evaporation, some of your products getting rejected, some of your product being taken out for testing and inspection purposes, etc. So this cost is not accounted for by the business, and it usually carries a nil value because it is something that you expect to happen. So it will carry a nil value and is not accounted for by the business. But let's look at other losses, because just as the business would expect to have a loss due to the process in normal operating procedures or operating conditions, and they have that normal loss, the business will also there will also be other losses that the business will not expect. So in some cases, the production of output will shortfall of the expected target. So there are some cases where you expect to have 250 units, but that 200, you fall short of that 250 units by 5. So we're saying that this is an additional loss to your normal, because normally you already expect something to happen normally, but now this is a loss that is in addition to what you expect. This particular loss is referred to as an abnormal loss, and this loss is caused is due to things like negligence, inefficiency, and pilferage. So in other words, the workers may have been negligent, they weren't doing their due diligence, and you lose some of the product. They were not as efficient with the materials as they're supposed to be, and you didn't get what you wanted from what you would have inputted. In other words, in pilferage, which is like stealing, some stuff was stolen, so therefore you didn't get the output. So this is what we call an abnormal loss because you were not looking for it. So this normal loss was unexpected, and the business accounts for this normal loss or this loss in the income statement. So your normal loss is not accounted for and carries a nil value, but the abnormal loss is accounted for and is accounted for in your income statement. Now, the same way that you would have this abnormal loss, you can also have a gain. So we're seeing here that on the other hand, the production of output may exceed your expected target. So you expected to get 250 units and you get 255. You were not expecting the additional 55. So that additional output that you would have received is referred to as an abnormal gain because you were not looking for it. You were not expecting it. This gain is usually caused or is due to the fact that your workers were very efficient. Care was taken by your employees. It could be a situation where your material yield at the production process more than you expected it to. So these are all reasons that you can have an abnormal gain. And this abnormal gain, as I said, was unexpected, and the business will also account for this gain in the income statement. So at this time, I want to thank you for watching this video on process costing, and we will then look at an example question with respect to applying the valuation of inventory using our FIFO and also our AVCO method in our subsequent videos. So thanks for watching.